Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here. Let's see, can you hear me with this? All right, good. I've never been accused of being quiet, but there's a first time for anything. This is my first time here, and it's such a pleasure to come out and see everyone. I have been gawking at your absolutely amazing library. I was saying your children's section alone is twice the size of the library for my entire community. And incredibly well done. I'm sure I am not alone in this room of being a total book nerd and libraryaholic. Like most in my line of work, I got my start in libraries. In my case, I grew up in Oregon. And my grandmother, who's an English teacher, took care of us most summers because our parents worked, so we spent our time on a farm in Tillamook County, Oregon. Has anyone ever had Tillamook cheese? Ah, see, that's the family business. Thank you very much. Though I'm also very partial, I'm not going to lie, to Tillamook ice cream. You should definitely be having some of that too. My daughter loved it when we go home to visit Oregon because you can actually have ice cream for breakfast. It is allowed. But as you can imagine, when you're a small kid on a dairy farm, there's not seeming a lot to do, so we spent our summers with the library reading program. And I was talking to your librarians here. It's like, okay, back in my day, we did this all for scratch and sniff stickers, especially cotton candy. I mean, that smell alone, I just want to sit down and read a book. It's like a conditioned response now. I understand they get more plastic things now. I'm going to stand by scratch and sniff stickers. Sometimes the old ways are the best way. But I grew up with books and stories. As you can imagine, my grandmother's favorite author was Earl Stanley Gardner. Perry Mason readers here, anyone? The original John Grisham? So, love those books. So from the very beginning, I was drawn to stories that had, things that went bump in the night, but particularly a puzzle. I've always been drawn to mysteries and how do we solve them. Having said all that, I can't quite explain how I became an author, other than sometimes ignorance is bliss. So I was growing up in mostly rural areas of Oregon. So as you can imagine, I had never met an editor, an agent, an author. New York might as well be the other side of the world if you're a kid from a small town in Oregon. But I loved to read. And even though my family was known more for producing a lot of accountants and engineers, that didn't stop me when I was 17 deciding, why not? I'll write a book this summer. I was getting ready to go off to college. I had this terrible waitressing job at night where rather famously I caught my hair on fire, not once, but twice. There was a lot of Aquanet. I just want to throw that out there. But clearly I was not going to make it in food service. So during the day, I got in my head, I would write a book. And I was reading a lot, as you can imagine. And I had this idea of a young woman who runs a homeless shelter in Portland, Oregon, which is the beginning of some themes you'll see in my books. Social issues, things that are happening all around us. Who witnesses a murder? I'm pretty sure every book I've ever written, there's been a murder. And of course, the detective that now must keep her safe as the key witness. So there was a lot of good stuff going on there. And then ignorance is bliss. As weird as it sounds, in 3 months, I sat down and wrote a book. I think mostly because I didn't know any better. And then I went off to college, because that was my goal. I wrote a book. There's a beginning, a middle, and the end. And it was absolutely dreadful, but it was a completed manuscript, printed out, dot matrix. Back in the good old days, it was really actually very satisfying tearing off all those little dots. But, did the proverbial, shoved it under the mattress, and went off to college. And then when people asked what I did for my summer, and I'm like, I wrote a book. And it turned out I was now weird even beyond my own family. I mean, I was pretty comfortable being the odd one, among relatives, but it turned out even in college, people were like, nope, that is not normal. But the question became, well, are you going to publish it? Which I had honestly never even considered. So the next summer, I reread the book, realized it was really quite bad, rewrote the entire thing, and then decided, why not? I went to my library, because again, we're pre-internet and email, and my kid is pretty sure I chiseled this thing into stone. And, the dinosaurs flew it to New York from there, but found a book on how to get published and followed the instructions, and it was long and tedious. and you had to send in a query letter and a synopsis to like these mail rooms in New York where I think they just languished for over a year. And then one day I got a phone call saying, "We will read your book." And it was terribly exciting. So I had to rewrite the book yet again, as you can imagine, and I sent it in, and as strange as it sounds, I sold my first novel when I was 20 years old. And my father, who has been very skeptical of this whole novel writing business, because, making up things is not a real job, and who kind of cautioned me, writers make less than poverty level income. All of this work, and it's going to be, do you want fries with that money? And sadly, he was not wrong. It turns out you start your career in writing and in entertainment industry in general for love. But I sold the book. I had just enough money to buy my first computer, and it was very exciting. And then I left college, and I got the real job. And briefly, for a whole 2 years, I had health care benefits, but I had to wear pantyhose. And there was a commute, and there was a cubicle, and there was bosses. And it turned out that did not beat it all out. At the end, I was like, nope, I want to go back to just making up my stories and having a good time. So by then, I had met other authors, and I joined a writing group. And it's interesting when I go out and talk to people, because many of us think authors, we must be competitive, but actually we're incredibly collegial. I joke, there's only so many of us running around with voices in our head. We're really excited to meet one another. And we really do want to geek out and debate things like head hopping and point of view and plotting versus pantsing, which possibly the people who really love us do not want to talk about at the dinner table. So we are a real community, and it was meeting other authors that really got my career going. They were the ones who taught me how to read a royalty statement and pointed out the fact that I had written at that point 8 novels and still was making "Do you want fries with that money?" And that, in fact, you can make this a career, but I needed to actually give it some thought. They helped me get my first agent, and I sent her the books I'd written, which were smaller, like romantic suspense kind of books, very similar. There was a murder. There was generally some, police law enforcement element that was struggling to keep someone alive to save the day. And they made, their small genre novels and made small genre amounts of money. So I sent them to this agent in New York, and she read them, and she got back to me, and she's like, "We need to talk." I'm like, "Okay." She's like, "What are your goals?" And I'm like, "I want to be a full-time novelist. I've done this now, and I think this is what I want my life to be." And she's like, "Okay, well then I need to just give this to you straight. Your romance is okay, but your violence is exquisite. I want you to go out there and write me the bloodiest serial killer book you can think of. Kill everyone, kill them every chapter, just kill a lot of people. Send that to me, and we can make you a full-time author." So that's what I did. The book was called The Perfect Husband, because at this point I'm 25, and I'm still way too intimidated to talk to law enforcement. I don't know how. And again, we've established my family can make cheese, balance books, and okay, fine, engineer some doodads that are handy. We didn't even have a firefighter. It's like, come on, Gene Poole, you could have helped me with this. So I came up with the idea of a young wife and mother who realizes her husband is a serial killer, and she helps put him away in prison. And then the opening of the book is his escape from prison and her realizing she will be the first person he comes after. So to keep herself and her daughter safe, she's going to have to learn how to get tough. And it turned out to be the perfect foil, where I could have an action-based serial killer plot, but it wasn't heavy on law enforcement or police procedural just yet. It actually was what we've now come to call domestic suspense. I'd like to say I'm the pioneer of domestic suspense, but I think that's actually Daphne du Maurier. But I like her books too. So yes, we ended up selling that to New York. That book became, As Tess Gerritsen told me one day, only in publishing can you become a virgin again. So we pretend none of the other books happened, and 10 years later, I became an overnight success. And who was I to argue with that? And then in some of my first introductions to how publishing works, I had this entire write-up in the New York Times for The Perfect Husband. And I was so excited. My editor calls, "Your book is in the New York Times." And I'm like, yes, I have totally made it. And then I get the article, and my book cover was in the New York Times. And there was an actually excellent piece on how brilliant the cover was. Not me, not the book. But to this day, for the record, that cover is considered one of iconic. It had The Perfect Husband in gold, and then embossed a burning wedding dress against this black backdrop. It remains 25 years later my all-time favorite cover. But it's like, well, okay, so I'm getting a good education. This is important in publishing. You want a really good cover. But the good news from then on out, I got to work with some really brilliant editors too, and truly develop my craft and learn how to be a suspense novelist. So using Kiss Her Goodbye, I will talk to you about what goes into the making of a novel, even to this day for me. So one of my first things, I love to research. If I was not a novelist, I probably would be a reporter of some sort, just because I love the excuse to talk to other people about what they do for a living. It's very kind of you all to come here tonight, but really, my average dinner time conversation of what did you do today is, I typed a lot. Then I deleted most of it. I will type again tomorrow. As exciting stories go, there's not much to it. But then, like 2 weeks ago, I was at a forensic anthropology lab at UNH where they identify skeletal remains. That was very cool. I've had the opportunity to go to the body farm. That was very cool. So most of my books start with an idea that's going to be research-based. Something I've encountered, read in the news, a real case that gets me thinking. Why would this happen? How do we handle something like that? What would this investigative procedure look like? In the case of Kiss Her Goodbye, I happened to be on a boat, actually, in Baja, California, the way, people do. Playing with wells, the way, people do. And I met a couple who, from Tucson, Arizona, who in their free time volunteered to help resettle refugees. And in particular in Tucson, there's a large Afghan community. So they were currently assisting a family, a lot of, say, the interpreters, the allies that helped our troops when they were overseas in Afghanistan. And they were talking about refugees are a legal status. It is a designation from the United Nations. We have invited them into our country. We actually pick where they will settle. They don't know. They generally, often even on the plane, they'll get told, you're going to Tucson now. But it's great, but as you can imagine, these are people that literally have the clothes on their back, generally are families with many kids, and they hit an airport runway, and that's the first they get to prepare for their new life in Tucson. So it's volunteers that really make this happen. Everything from greeting them at the airport with car seats for the kids, to help getting them to their apartments that other agencies have helped arrange, stocking it with food to get them through the first week. Can you imagine if you have 4 small children and you've come from a refugee camp in Islamabad? There's a lot to come to terms with really quickly. At the same time, while you are a legally approved status, you still need the government to issue the Social Security, your license, school registration, get enrolled in classes, help find a job, learn possibly mass transit. It's a lot to come up to speed with, and most of these families are isolated and all alone. They have lost their country, they've lost their livelihood, and they've lost the extended family that was their safety net. When they were done describing all of these experiences, I, one, realized I didn't know anything about refugees the way I thought I did, but it's also such a human experience, both for the Afghan refugees going through it, But these really amazing volunteers I was talking to, I mean, there's a whole network of them throughout the country that go out of their way to try to ease other people's burdens and make them feel welcome in our country. Because getting the opportunity to come here is still the dream for all of these people. So after talking to them, I'm like, this would make an excellent Frankie Elkin case. Because if you want to talk about a population that's isolated, at risk, I was like, what would happen if, say, one of these young mothers disappeared? And they're like, we have no idea. They're not even in the system yet. You're kind of in this weird limbo. The family's isolated. They might know the language. They might not. It'd be exactly the kind of case that would fall through the cracks. And from there, I was off and running. I spent 3 months researching my books. Kiss Her Goodbye was very different for me. Most of the time when I'm doing research, I do things like a forensic anthropology lab, or I've gone to the body farm, or the FBI Academy, or I once called a guy in upstate New York that tracked fugitives because he made the mistake of writing an article that appeared in SWAT magazine, and I read it in the doctor's office and thought that would be really cool. So since he, decided to include his email, I contacted him and said, would you teach me how to track fugitives? He's like, normally I train DEA agents. I'm like, well, I want to write about how to get it correct if you were a DEA agent. And he's like, okay, fair enough. And we had 3 really fun afternoons where I learned to track fugitives, which is actually quite terrifying, it turns out. So 3 months of doing, generally in my experience, procedure or hands-on law enforcement. Kiss Her Goodbye was not that. Using the volunteer network, I interviewed people, generally by Zoom, refugees that were willing to tell me their story. Some of them were beyond heartbreaking. By the end of the call, I would just sit there and cry. They would cry. It's a scale of loss. I don't, to this day, know that I can actually put into words, though I did my best in the novel. I interviewed doctors that worked in refugee camps in Europe, which have been compared to concentration camps. The conditions can be absolutely so terrible. I interviewed some police officers and people like, how do you handle this? A missing person's case where you have no information on the person. Like, they still really don't exist in our systems. And the more I learned, and then my fun research, because you always have to have some things that are different. The Frankie Elkin books, this is the 4th in the series, and Frankie Elkin is a returning character who's an everyday person, but has this passion for trying to find the missing the rest of the world has forgotten. She is known now, this was not planned on my part, of having like an animal roommate in each book. So the first one was Piper, the feral cat. Then, still my personal favorite, Daisy, the search and rescue dog. That was really fun research. And then the third was Krabby from the remote atoll I spent time on in the Pacific and was the closest I've come to probably dying for the sake of a novel. And then finally, for this newest book, Petunia, the green iguana, which was a reach for me because I really do not do reptiles. But spent some time with an iguana handler, had an iguana come take over my office for the day. Trust me, anything the iguana wanted, the iguana got. Actually kind of like iguanas now. Who knew? They're surprisingly personable or interesting. We'll say interesting. They're very interesting. So 3 months of kind of trying to get the ingredients together and just think. And the way I think is hiking. I live in the mountains of New Hampshire, and I have 3 dogs, which is much more my speed for pets, just so we're clear. Love cats too, but spent a lot of time hiking the trails with my dogs and just thinking. And then one day I'll just get the puzzle. That's what every thriller starts with, the puzzle. Something terrible has gone wrong with this family. And I'm like, it has to be a family. It's a young mother who has a gift for languages, is a linguist and interpreter, makes it to the US with her dark, glowering, mysterious, we're not sure if we actually like him husband, and this absolutely adorable 4-year-old daughter who was born in the refugee camps and is already a very old soul when this young mom disappears 8 weeks after being in this country and is not seen again. And that's what I knew when I started writing this book. that there was a missing mother, and this 4-year-old little girl needed Frankie to bring her mother home. So I don't plot. I am what we call in a writing parlance a pantser, writing by the seat of your pants. Again, these are things we can debate forever. Authors like to get together just so we can tell each other we're doing it wrong. It's kind of 50-50, half plot, half pants. People who plot say that's how, how can you write a book, especially a puzzle, if you don't know how it's going to come together? And those of us who are pantsers say, how boring, now it's a book report. If you know all the answers, now it's just taking you 6 months to get there. I have to show up each morning because I don't know what's going to happen next. And when you get to the end of the novel and you say things like, oh, I never saw that coming, yay, neither did I. I've actually tried plotting. Every now and then you have to think, because it's so painful to write, that maybe these other people know something. I cannot follow an outline to save my life, because in the end I get a new idea and a new idea. I think it's because I am a character-driven writer. So what I really need is 100 pages for my family, for Frankie and her band of misfits that's going to help her in Tucson to come alive. And then I feel if I'm doing my job right, they take over. And it is officially their story now. And my job is just to keep up. And for all the research I do, and while I'm still honored to think my violence can be really good, I'm a psychological suspense writer. It is, why do we do the things we do? What is the nature of evil has driven a lot of my books, to tell you the truth. I think in Kiss Her Goodbye, it's what is the nature of family? And how far would you go for the ones you love? And particularly if you have a family that spans generations and so many relationships. And the things I really got from speaking with so many of the refugees, we spend a lot of time in this day and age of thinking of all the ways we are different. But what I got from speaking with these people is all the ways we are exactly the same. And all of us just want a better world for our child. So that became the inspiration for Kiss Her Goodbye. I researched it for 3 months. I drafted it for 6 months. And even though this is now my, 35th novel, and you'd think I'd know what I was doing, I then rewrote it for 3 more months. Every single book. I can't decide, well, I did catch my hair on fire twice. I might have a problem with learning curve. But each and every time, it's a drafting process for me. And then I love my editors. I've had several in the course of my career. I've never reached a point as an author where I've thought, oh, I know exactly what I'm doing now. I appreciate the insights, and you need to tighten up here, and you need to fix this there. And my job always is to try to then polish and make the best book possible for you. And to this day, I don't consider myself necessarily the best writer, but I think the rewriting thing, that's the part where I start to shine, though it's a little depressing some days, to tell you the truth. I've spent most of my day today in a hotel room working on 3 pages. I've only deleted 2 out of the 3 so far, so there's hope for tomorrow. So this is a life of an author. I have a global career. I'm published in 30 countries. I'm on the road probably 6 months out of the year. It's like that for most best-selling authors. Having an international career, I spent 2 weeks in France earlier doing a book tour. That's really excellent. I like how the French do book tours. The food is way, way better. There is a lot of promotional component, but I think I speak on behalf of a lot of my fellow authors when we say, this is the part that's really nice. For most of us, there's still a sense that our mothers have really large warehouses filled with stacks of our books. And there's still a moment, like if I'm on a plane or something and see someone reading my book, that I get a look like, it's a total stranger reading something I wrote. My kid's always like, you should go up and say hi. And I'm like, oh God, no. How terrifying would that be if you're like just sitting on a plane reading a book and you look up and there's the author like, hi, want to know how it ends? So I still like the quiet life. I think that's best for all of us. And I'm at my happiest reading. I still read a ton. I would love to hear the best books you guys have read lately when we come up and do the signing. I personally still read a lot of thrillers. I'm a big fan of Greg Hurwitz. Karen Slaughter, We Are All Guilty Here came out in August. I think it's one of the best books of 2025. Absolutely love that book. I can tell you how it ends. No. I think Karen is one of our best working suspense novelists today. So I'm a huge, huge fan there. Tess Gerritsen, Joe Finder, if you like spy novels. The Oligarch's Daughter came out beginning of this year, also fabulous. I love historical thrillers. Actually, one of my best thrillers I probably read this year is from a newer author, Noelle, I'm not sure if I'm going to get her last name right, Ile, called Ask for Andrea. And it's very unique. It's a serial killer book told from the perspective of the 3 victims who are dead. Like when they first sent it to me, I was like, what is this going to be, Charlie's Angels with ghosts? But it's actually very psychological. Each girl, like the one was 3 years ago, 2 years ago, and then you start with a brand new victim. They're having to learn how to be ghosts on their own, but they show you different dimensions. You get to see like life with the killer, life with law enforcement, and then the final victim, her ghost doesn't know what to do, so she goes home and she sits with her parents because she's not so sure what she's supposed to do. And from her eyes, you get a sense of the victims. But I think it's one of the most ingenious and quite a page-turning novel. So I still read a lot. And what did I read on the plane coming here? I'm trying to think. It was, you guys must have all read it. I'm late to this party. Frozen River. I love that book. Yeah, that was very good. And I'm reading that also for the book I'm writing right now, which has some things from 1790s New England in it. So reading is still my favorite pastime. Then I hike a lot with the dogs, and then I write a book. And then when I'm all done, I get to come to amazing libraries and meet fabulous readers like you. But I'm here for you this evening, so who's brave enough to ask questions? Yes. How did I come up with Frankie? Frankie Elkin? Sure. I've been around a long time now. Part of being in this career for 30 years is I think for me to continue to write good books for you, I have to continue to be excited. So I started with serial killers because that was what we were all doing back in the 90s. But then, Criminal Minds came along, and we had a serial killer of the week in our living rooms, and it just became impossible to have anything new to say. So then I wrote Dee Dee Warren, which is local law enforcement, which was really a lot of fun for me. But how many police procedural shows do we also now have on TV now? It becomes difficult to come up with something more to say. Frankie Elkin is now based on something new we are seeing in the real world, which is amateur sleuths getting involved in cold cases. And it's everything from Sherlock societies, where you might get retired experts coming to work very famous cases, to there are real-life Frankie Elkins out there, many of them actually, because in the case of when you're looking at an old crime, if police procedure or forensics was going to solve it, it would have happened. And particularly when you look at marginalized communities, a lot of it is no one's really bothered to ask the hard questions or do the looking. And sometimes an outsider is the person they're more comfortable speaking with. And I'm fascinated by why does Frankie do what she does? I like, again, the psychology of it. And the honest answer is, I don't know yet. I mean, she's a recovering alcoholic. We know she's obsessive. We know she's mission-oriented. But she's putting her life on the line a lot. Maybe she's also self-destructive. Maybe it's all of the above. I like characters where we can't necessarily answer that question.
Any other questions?
I can offer, because generally I do get asked this, yes, Frankie Elkin has been optioned by Miramax. Hilary Swank had her originally, and I would have been very, very excited for that. But Hilary Swank had twins. So now we're working in a different direction, but it would be a lot of fun to see that come together. And I've done some movies of the week, but I like the stuff going on in streaming services now. These limited series are so author-friendly because in 8 episodes, you really can do justice to a book. Whereas before, when we were doing like the 2-hour movies, that's like a third of a book. So it would be very exciting to see what happens next in that field. So, yes. Oh, yes, I am. No, actually. So I don't plan way ahead. I have in the back of my mind, I think Frankie needs to end up back in Boston, and perhaps Dee Dee Warren needs to be there too. Because I like bringing characters, and I swear I was doing this before the Marvel Universe. I just think, why should we have to pick which character we can read about if you can get them all together? But I need the right case for that, and I don't have it yet. So instead, I've gone back to my roots as a romantic suspense author, so to speak, and I've gone Gothic. So I have an old abandoned lodge in the mountains of New Hampshire that's the scene of an infamous 30-year-old murder when an entire family of 6 disappeared in the middle of the night, leaving behind only bloody footprints. And a mysterious young couple that has shown up to rehabilitate it, but seem to know things they shouldn't know, while a dog has reappeared that's the spitting image of the dog from 30 years ago that knows things no dog should know, and now we're off and running. And if you know how it ends, I will totally take your advice. So that will come out next year, next August, and right now it's called You'll Be Sorry. But again, one of the questions I often get, titles can be in flux till the very end, just often too because someone else then will come up, or a TV show or a movie, and suddenly you can't use that title anymore. So, but currently that's what we have, and hopefully August of next year. All right? Oh, no, go ahead. How do I pick my settings? Well, for the longest time, it was determined by my characters. So when I had Dee Dee Warren, I was going to be in Boston. And I will say, if you're going to kill a lot of people, Boston is the best city. I mean, one long history of it, so at least you're working with professionals there. But for a smaller city, a lot of neighborhoods, you can get a sense of movement and different cultures even while still being in the same city. But Frankie can go anywhere. So a lot of that was based on locations. I mean, this last book was set in Tucson because the couple I met, that's where they worked and that's where they had connections. Still See You Everywhere, which is set on a remote atoll in the Pacific, and is the book before this one. It's because I foolishly went on vacation in a small atoll in the Pacific where we were off-grid, no means of contacting the real world, and then the plane that was supposed to come get us couldn't because there was a storm, and the plane also had the food, and it got and we were a lot less entertained after that. And it turns out I really do like electricity and air conditioning and plumbing. So after 5 days, I really was looking forward to civilization, but that became more of a 10-day feat. So, and then this new book, I did the mountains of New Hampshire because I wanted a good Gothic New England location, and I've actually had a lot of fun. I live in a small town in New Hampshire. My town is 400 people. And so I've been actually working with my own law enforcement. I've never done that before. I've always run off to talk to state or, FBI or people like that. And to learn small town policing, and particularly New Hampshire, we have a small population scout over such a huge geography. It really is DIY policing. That's the term they all use. I've been working on a scene where I'm getting a skeleton out of a well. So I work with the ME's office and the skeleton people, and I'm thinking bones, right? Kathy Reichs, we're gonna go down in the well, and we're gonna do this, and we're gonna do that, and they're looking at me like I'm insane. They're like, no, we got real jobs. Like, we're gonna send a volunteer fireman down to the bottom. We don't do ropes. We're not scaling some old historic well. Are you insane? He's going to take a lot of pictures. He's going to give us the bones. It's like, how does he give you the bones? He's going to put them in a plastic bin, and we're going to bring them up top. It's like, do you have like official bins? No, there's this thing I buy at Target I find works really well. And then I'm like, so mesh screens, you're going to sift the dirt? They're like, oh, yeah, but there's like $10,000 a screen. Last time we needed them, the state police and I went to Home Depot and built them that night. So I'm actually having a blast. I think this is law enforcement policing we can all wrap our heads around. So you'll have fun things to read about in August. right. Well, thank you all for coming out tonight, for supporting the library. And like I said, come up. I'm happy to sign, take photos, and I would love to hear what are the best books you've read lately. Thank you.